If you haven't watched my previous video on the introduction to arrow function, I will recommend that you watch it before proceeding with this video. I'll be linking it up somewhere in the screen above. And the reason for that is in this video, we shall be looking at when not to use arrow functions. My name is Kelvin and I am a software developer based in Nairobi, Kenya. And my goal is to help you go through technical documentations so that you may have an understanding of the tools that you're working with. If you're new here, consider liking this video, subscribing to this channel, and leaving a comment below. In case we mention any link in this video, you can find it in the description section of this video. Let us jump right in. If you're working with event handlers, you might consider not using arrow functions. Let us look at an example. In my index.html file, I have an input field with a name of name and an ID of name. Then I have another div with an ID of greeting. And the intention is when I type in my name in the form input field, it should pick the characters and render them in the greeting div. In my index.js file, I am basically grabbing the element with an ID of greeting and also grabbing the element with an ID of name. Then I am adding an event listener to the name element, which is the form input field, and I listen to the key app event. Let us run this example. So when I type my name Kelvin in the input field, you can see that hello Kelvin is being rendered in the greetings div, or the div with the greetings ID. But when we convert this anonymous regular function to an arrow function and try to run the example, you can see that we are getting an error. Type error, cannot read property of undefined. And this is because an arrow function does not have the this keyword. Another place that you might consider not using arrow function is when you are using object methods. So I have a constant called counter, which is an object and it has a count. Then I have a method or a function called next. Let us use regular functions, then we shall convert them to arrow functions. So I have a method with a count, then I have two functions, next and previous. And basically it increments the count, the next function, and the previous function decrements the function. Let us console log the result. So count, we get the initial count of 0. Let us use the next function to increment the count to 1. We can do it twice. To increment the count to 2. Then the previous to decrement the count back to 1. But when we convert these functions, or regular functions, to arrow functions, you can see that we are getting not a number. And the reason is this keyword does not exist in an arrow function. So when working with object methods, consider not using arrow function. Another place where you should consider not using arrow function is when you're working with prototype methods. So I have a function called counter, and I initialize the count with 0. Then I can attach methods to the prototype. So counter.prototype.next. Let us start with the regular function. And it returns an incremented version of this dot count. Then we have another function called previous, and it basically decrements the count. Then we can initialize the counter, and you can see that we are getting the result as expected. But when we convert these regular functions to arrow functions, you can see that we are already getting not a number. And the reason is because this keyword does not exist in an arrow function. The final consideration is if the function is using the arguments object, you should not use arrow functions. For instance, if we have, let's just convert this to a regular function. $100 and so if we have a regular function, it does have an arguments object. If you don't know what an arguments object is, you can consider watching my video on the functions argument object. I will be linking it up in the card above. And you can see in this case, it is an iterator and it has a value of 100. But if we convert this regular function to an arrow function, you can see that the arguments object is basically pointing to nothing. If you have found value in this video, consider liking this video, subscribing to this channel, and leaving a comment below. In case you want any link that has been mentioned in this video, you can find it in the description section below. Thank you and see you in the next video.